Okay guys, I've been watching the Spider-Man Brand New Day trailer a very unhealthy amount of times. I've been wondering who is Sadie Sink playing, and initially I thought it was Jean Grey, but diving deeper and deeper I thought no, it's not, and I've worked it out. So sit down, relax, and let's check out my theory. Okay, so it's been a big mystery on who Sadie Sink is playing in Spider-Man Brand New Day. And there's been a lot of wild theories that either she's playing Black Cat, Gwen Stacy, another MJ variant, Jean Grey. However, I seem to think it's someone completely different. And the answers are actually in the third Doomsday teaser trailer with the X-Men. Let's break it down. Before I reveal who Sadie Sink is playing, let's hear me out for a second and gather up some evidence first. So notice in the third Doomsday trailer, we see the X-Men, we see the return of Scott Summers, and also notice when we got that chair reveal from Marvel and we got the cast of Doomsday. I'm sure again, it's probably not the full cast, but notice how Scott Summers is there, but the actor for Jean Grey isn't there. Spider-Man Brand New Day is almost certainly going to roll us straight into Doomsday afterwards. And it made me think, would you pair a young Sadie Sink with an older Scott Summers? I don't think so. I think she'll be playing a character very similar to Jean Grey. So looking into the teaser trailer for Doomsday, where we see the X-Men, we see Scott Summers, we don't see Jean Grey, we don't see the casting announcement for Jean Grey, and it makes me think that two things. Jean Grey is either dead or she's a small part of Doomsday. I don't think it's going to be necessarily a small surprise cameo. I also don't think it's a coincidence. However, there's a comic book run in an alternate universe where Jean Grey is dead, which I think could be the case. I know Jean Grey can't catch a break with these numerous deaths that she's received in different forms of media, but I believe in this X-Men universe, Jean Grey is already dead. However, Scott and Jean may have already had a child, Rachel Summers, and I believe this is who Sadie Sink is playing. But like I said, in hindsight, even if Jean Grey isn't dead in this universe, I don't think they're going to be matching up Sadie Sink, who's in her 20s, and the actor for Scott Summers, who's probably in his 50s by now. I also don't think Marvel are going to be wanting to throw too many variants before Doomsday's even happened. I think we're going to get a sort of mainline X-Men universe, which is the one that we see in the Doomsday trailer, which I believe is the same X-Men universe that Monica Rambeau ended up in after the events of the Marvels. And like I said, it makes sense for Sadie Sink to be from this X-Men universe, which we are guaranteed obviously to get in Doomsday, hence it being in the trailer. And with Spider-Man Brand New Day coming out just before Doomsday, you can kind of see where I'm going with this. I think this is going to line up perfectly, which is why I believe my theory is very tangible. In the Brand New Day trailer, we're seeing that Sadie Sink's character has some sort of psychic ability as we see this clip, but it also seems a bit scarce and a bit random. It's not the typical Jean Grey fashion where it's complete control and not necessarily just jumping from body to body. This is what makes me think the powers seem a bit unstable. There seems to be a lack of control, and it doesn't seem very Jean Grey-like. However, this would make sense of this being Rachel Summers, who's still getting used to her powers, unable to do as impressive things as Jean Grey. Like I said, this lines up perfectly well with her introduction into the comics, which also happens in an alternate reality, in a reality where Jean Grey has already passed away, but Scott has already had her, and obviously she's his daughter. Also, with them just squeezing Jean Grey into a Spider-Man movie, it sort of steals Spider-Man's thunder. It's a major X-Men character to introduce without even having the rest of the X-Men in this movie. Having Jean Grey squeezed into Brand New Day causes too many problems. It's too important of a role just to squeeze into a Spider-Man movie without the introduction of the X-Men, and it's a character we've already seen two different interpretations of. I think after Secret Wars, when the X-Men get rebooted, that would then make sense for Jean Grey to be introduced. And I believe that right now, squeezing a brand new Jean Grey before Secret Wars has even happened doesn't quite make sense. However, Rachel Summers, a much smaller character, a character that's a bit more expendable to use for the plot of Brand New Day and then to use for what I'll get into in another video for what I believe the post-credit scene is, which will be a perfect way to raise the stakes a little bit in Doomsday, but to also give us a good introduction to this new X-Men universe that we're going to see in Avengers Doomsday. So, who remembers the post-credit scene in the Marvels, where at the end we see Monica Rambeau end up in an X-Men universe. And again, we get comic accurate X-Men, but it's clearly not the same universe, as we see Binary there, who's a variant of Monica Rambeau's mother. And it would make sense for this to be a alternate take on the X-Men universe that we've had from the Fox era films. But with the comic accurate spin, they're no longer wearing the black sort of leather sort of suits.
Am I going to war or a circus?
What'd you expect? Black leather?
But with Binary being there, we can see there's some differences to this universe. I can almost guarantee that this X-Men universe in the Marvel's post-credit scene is exactly the same as what we see in the Doomsday teaser. And with Sadie Sink playing Rachel Summers, Scott Summers' daughter, I think this is the perfect way to subtly introduce the X-Men in Brand New Day, where they're not stealing Spider-Man's thunder, but with Sadie Sink's ties to this universe, as I believe this is where she's from, and I believe that she arrived here through an incursion, as this is the Multiverse saga, and we've gotten plenty of storylines throughout this saga of incursions happening. We see this in Doctor Strange 2, Deadpool and Wolverine.
Fuck the Avengers. Yeah.
And they kind of touched on it on Spider-Man No Way Home. I think it makes perfect sense that Rachel Summers arrived in the MCU via a incursion. And I think it will be quite similar to how Monica Rambeau ended up in this universe, with Monica Rambeau from the MCU now in this X-Men universe, and now Sadie Sink's character, Rachel Summers, from that X-Men universe now in the MCU, which would make perfect sense on why these universes are colliding, as each universe has a member from the other universe who shouldn't be there. Like I said earlier, Rachel Summers in the comics comes from an alternate timeline, which, again, Rachel Summers in Brand New Day comes from an alternate timeline. In the comics, she gets displaced into different realities, which, again, Rachel Summers in the MCU from this Doomsday universe, strong psychic powers like we've seen in the Brand New Day trailer, and struggles with control of her powers, which again, I think we'll see with her being restrained in damage control. And I'm going to have another video covering the full plot of Brand New Day coming out very soon. I think this will fit very nicely into the Brand New Day story without stealing Spider-Man's thunder, but as well as being the perfect setup for Avengers Doomsday. Please also stay tuned for my Brand New Day post-credit theory, and I think that will make a lot more sense on where we're heading after the Brand New Day. It's all connected. But thank you very much, guys, for watching. Please feel free to like, subscribe. Let me know what your thoughts are on who Sadie Sink is playing. Feel free to drop your thoughts in the comments. Feel free to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one.